in a quiet residential neighborhood of Columbus, Ohio. As the season transitioned to fall in early September, the maple trees lining the streets were gradually beginning to change color. In a modest two-story house on one corner, Carol Wilson lived with her son Tyler. Carol had worked at a local accounting firm, Adams Accounting, for over 10 years, earning trust as a mid-level employee. She kept her light brown hair in a neat bob and was always meticulous about her appearance. To balance work and family life, she never failed to maintain a detailed schedule. "Mom, I'll be late today, so heat up a frozen pizza for me." 16-year-old Tyler was tall, with the same light brown hair as his mother and striking blue eyes inherited from his father, Michael. He was on his high school soccer team and often spent time with friends after finishing practice. "What time will you be home?" "You need to be back by 10, Carol said, turning around. I know, Tyler replied, waving his hand casually. Carol and Michael Wilson's divorce had happened 5 years ago. Michael had worked as a construction site supervisor, supporting the family, but gradually started coming home late due to work connections and began drowning himself in alcohol. Arguments increased, and Carol made her final decision on the day Michael forgot Tyler's 11th birthday. After the divorce, Michael left Ohio and moved to the West Coast. Though he called Tyler a few times a year, they had grown distant. Child support payments arrived on time, but that was the extent of his responsibilities as a father. Carol's parents, Diane and Harold Johnson, lived in an upscale residential area in the suburbs. Before retirement, Harold had been an executive at a real estate development company and had built considerable wealth. Diane was an upper-class housewife, well known in local social circles. "Carol, if you just tried a little harder, you could have a much better life," was what Diane said every time she met her daughter. To Carol, it sounded like nothing but criticism. Carol had a sister named Linda. Linda had studied fashion design in college and now worked at an upscale boutique in Cincinnati. Single, she drove around town in a white BMW her parents had given her for the holidays, drawing envy from those around her. "Linda is going to Paris again. It's a birthday present from your father." Diane would bring up Linda's accomplishments and smile at Carol with a look of condescension. The relationship between Carol and Linda had been complicated since childhood. Their parents always favored Linda and accepted all her demands. Meanwhile, Carol was often told to be patient because you're the older sister. Even in school, when Carol received straight A's, it was accepted without fanfare, but when Linda got B's, she was lavishly praised. "I'm going to the beach with Mom and Dad this weekend. Should I take Tyler along?" Linda would say, barely concealing her sense of superiority toward Carol. She had been spoiled by her parents and raised to think only about getting what she wanted. Within this family dynamic, Carol had learned to be independent from an early age. She went to college on scholarship and immediately began working at an accounting firm after graduation. Marriage to Michael, Tyler's birth, and then divorce, she had grown strong and resilient through it all. "Tyler, you are my pride and joy," Carol often told her son. Tyler understood his mother's struggles and was grateful. He worked hard at both studies and sports, dreaming of going to medical school someday. For Carol, family now meant only Tyler. Though she maintained obligatory contact with her parents and Linda, the emotional distance between them grew year by year. She sometimes wondered why her family was the way it was. But each time, seeing Tyler's smile would help her face forward again. On a Tuesday evening, Carol felt anxious as Tyler was late coming home. He should have returned long ago. While preparing dinner, she occasionally looked out the window, searching for her son. "His practice must have run late," she muttered to herself as she picked up her phone and called Tyler. But there was only a ringing tone with no answer. 10 minutes later, Carol's phone rang. The display showed an unknown number. "Hello, this is Carol Wilson," she answered. "This is Jones from the emergency department of Mercy General Hospital. Your son has been in a traffic accident. Could you come to the hospital immediately?" The voice on the phone was calm, but Carol's heart began to race. Her hands trembled, and her voice caught in her throat. What's his condition?" she managed to say. "We'll discuss the details at the hospital. Please come as soon as possible." Carol turned off the stove, grabbed her keys, and jumped into her car without even putting on a coat. A cold rain had begun to fall. The dashboard clock showed 8:15 p.m. The trip to the hospital normally took 20 minutes, but to Carol, it felt like forever. "Tyler, it's okay, Mama's coming right away." After parking at the emergency entrance of Mercy General Hospital, Carol ran through the rain. When she gave her son's name at the emergency reception, a nurse guided her inside. A middle-aged doctor was waiting. His expression was grave, sending an ominous feeling through Carol's chest. "Regarding your son's condition, he was hit by a car while walking with a friend at an intersection. He suffered a severe impact to his head and is currently in a coma. There is internal bleeding, and his intracranial pressure is elevated." These words sounded distant and faint to Carol's ears. Her vision narrowed, and she felt unsteady on her feet. "Please sit down," the doctor supported her elbow. "We're currently preparing for emergency surgery. We need to stop the internal bleeding and reduce the brain pressure." "Will he survive?" Carol asked with trembling lips. The doctor hesitated for a moment, then answered, "We will do our best. However, the prospects for recovery are unclear at this point." Carol sat in a chair outside the operating room, covering her face with her hands. Tears flowed unstoppably. The day Tyler was born, his first steps, his first day of school, his smile yesterday morning, all these memories flashed through her mind like a film reel. The surgery lasted 4 hours. At 1 a.m., the doctor appeared with a tired face. "The surgery was successful. We've stopped the internal bleeding, and the brain pressure has stabilized. However, he remains in a coma. The next 48 hours will be critical." Carol saw Tyler in the ICU. Half his face was covered in bandages, with an intubation tube in his mouth and an 4 in his arm. Monitors beeped rhythmically. She held her son's hand and whispered, "Mama is here. You're a strong boy. Please wake up." Toward morning, after napping on a hospital cot, Carol called her accounting firm and arranged for emergency leave. Her boss, Margaret, was understanding and said, "Take all the time you need. I'm praying for Tyler's recovery." In the afternoon, a nurse asked, "Have you contacted your family?" Carol suddenly realized she hadn't thought about calling her parents in the shock and confusion. With trembling fingers, she dialed her mother's number. After 3 rings, she heard Diane's voice. "Carol? This is unusual. What's wrong?" Carol explained the situation while holding back tears. "Tyler's been in an accident. He's in a coma." Her words caught, and Carol took a deep breath. "I'm at the hospital. I need help." A moment of silence on the other end. Then, "Oh, that's terrible. But he'll be fine, right? He's young." Carol listened in disbelief. "No, he's not fine. There's damage to his brain. I'm sorry, but we have a trip to Hawaii with Linda next week. We've been planning it for 3 months. If we cancel now, we won't get our money back." A cold wave washed over Carol's heart. "While my son is hovering between life and death? You'll be fine. You've always managed on your own," Diane said. "We'll check on him when we get back from the trip. I'll let Linda know too." Carol hung up without a word. Tears streamed down her cheeks. She returned to Tyler's room and stood by the window, looking outside. The rain had stopped, but the sky was covered with gray clouds. 3 days passed. Though Tyler's condition had stabilized, he remained in a coma. Carol slept in a hospital chair, barely able to shower properly. Her colleagues Jennifer and Mark took turns visiting the hospital to support her. They brought food, changes of clothes, and sometimes stayed with Tyler so she could go home and rest. Carol, you need to rest a little or you'll collapse, Jennifer said. I'll stay here, so go home for at least an hour. Carol was grateful for her friend's kindness. In contrast, there had been no contact from her parents. On the morning of the fourth day, Carol opened social media and decided to block her parents and Linda. She removed them from her friends list and deleted them from her contacts. I don't need them anymore, she said quietly. That afternoon, as Carol was gently stroking Tyler's head, there was a knock at the hospital room door. Ms. Wilson, you have a phone call, a nurse said. Carol headed to the nurse's station phone. The display showed her mother's number. After a moment's hesitation, she picked up. Carol, we're back from Hawaii. It was a wonderful trip, Diane's voice was cheerful and unapologetic. So, how is Tyler doing? Carol didn't answer. By the way, blocking us on social media is so childish. We're family. Carol still maintained her silence. Has Tyler died? Diane's voice grew colder. If there's insurance money, could you share some? You know Linda is trying to buy a condominium. Carol's hands began to shake. She couldn't say anything. Tears welled up in her eyes as she stood there in shock. Carol? Are you listening? Silently, Carol slowly hung up the receiver. She collapsed onto a bench in the hallway, hugging her trembling shoulders. Nurse Judy sat down beside her. Are you okay? Carol looked up. In her eyes was not just sadness but something else, a sense of determination. I'm fine. I've had enough, she said, standing up and returning to Tyler's room. The morning sunlight streaming through the windows of Mercy General Hospital gently touched Tyler's pale face. Carol sat in the bedside chair, holding her son's hand while reviewing work documents. A week had passed since the accident, but there had been no significant change in Tyler's condition. Good morning, Ms. Wilson. Nurse Becky Clark opened the door with a cheerful voice. In her mid-40s, she was trusted by ICU patient families for her warm smile and efficient work. This morning's vitals are stable. And there's some improvement in the brain waves. Carol managed a tired smile. Thank you, Becky. While checking Tyler's monitors, Becky asked, have you eaten anything? Carol shook her head. Not yet. This won't do, Becky gently admonished. My lunch break starts at 1. Let's eat something together in the cafeteria. And don't refuse. Carol nodded gratefully. For the past week, Becky had been her emotional support, caring not only for Tyler but for her health as well. Just after noon, as Carol finished replying to emails from the office, Dr. Ramsey came by for rounds. He was the chief neurosurgeon and Tyler's attending physician. Ms. Wilson, could we talk for a moment? They stepped into the hallway. Dr. Ramsey began explaining in a gentle tone. I've looked at Tyler's latest MRI results. The swelling in his brain is gradually subsiding. This is a good sign. Carol felt a glimmer of hope. Does that mean he might wake up? The possibility is definitely increasing, the doctor chose his words carefully. However, recovery from a coma is unpredictable. We're doing our best, but it may take time. Carol took a deep breath. I understand. Is there anything I can do? Actually, there is. Research shows that even in a comatose state, patients often retain their hearing. Talking to him can stimulate the brain and potentially aid recovery. Share memories, daily events, anything really. Back in Tyler's room, Carol took her son's hand and began talking. She spoke about Tyler as a child, school events, and memories they shared. Sometimes with tears, sometimes with laughter. Later that afternoon, as Carol was talking to Tyler about Wednesday's soccer practice, she noticed a subtle change. Tyler's fingers had moved ever so slightly. Tyler? Carol caught her breath. Move your fingers again. But there was no further response. Carol quickly pressed the nurse call button. When Becky rushed in, Carol explained excitedly. His fingers moved. Just a little, but definitely. Becky carefully examined Tyler's hand and checked his neurological reflexes. This might just be a reflex, but it's a good sign. I'll report it to Dr. Ramsey. That night, on Becky's recommendation, Carol borrowed the hospital shower and spent the night in the restroom. I'll be back in the morning, she promised Tyler. The next morning, when Carol returned to the hospital, the medical team was having a conference in Tyler's room. As she approached, Dr. Ramsey explained. We're seeing changes in Tyler's brain waves, suggesting an improvement in consciousness level. We still need to observe carefully, but this is definitely a positive development. Tears welled up in Carol's eyes. Thank you. From that day on, talking to Tyler became Carol's daily routine. She spent hours at her son's bedside, reading books and sharing updates about his school friends. Sometimes, Tyler's friends visited the hospital and talked to him for short periods. On Monday morning, 2 weeks after the accident, Carol's cell phone rang. The screen displayed Linda. After a moment's hesitation, Carol answered. Carol? It's been a while, Linda's voice sounded cheerful. I'm really worried about Tyler. Carol replied coolly, hello. I heard from Mom. She said you hung up on her. But she was just concerned. Carol gave a bitter smile. Concerned? Is talking about insurance money being concerned? About that. Linda continued, choosing her words carefully. Mom and Dad asked me to call you. They're concerned about Tyler too. Really? Carol's voice was filled with sarcasm. And, if there's any progress with the insurance, they'd like to know. Carol felt anger rising within her. Tyler is still alive. This is not the time to talk about insurance money. Of course, Linda quickly said. It's just preparing for the worst. You must be having a hard time alone? Financial assistance might. Assistance? Carol's voice trembled. My son is hovering between life and death, and all you people think about is money? That's not what I meant. That's enough, Carol said quietly but firmly. Don't call again. I have no business with you or our parents anymore. After hanging up, Carol exhaled deeply. Her heart was filled with anger and sadness, but she also felt a strange sense of liberation. She no longer expected anything from them. Returning to Tyler's room, she found Elena Sanchez, the hospital social worker, waiting. She visited regularly to listen to Carol's situation and offer support. What's wrong? You look pale, Elena asked with concern. Carol sighed and told her about the call from her sister. Elena listened carefully, taking notes. Ms. Wilson, if I may offer some advice, she said with a serious expression. I recommend you record all communications from your family. Emails, text messages, phone calls, recordings too, if possible. Why? You may need legal protection in the future. Especially regarding Tyler's care or his assets, Elena explained quietly. Your parents' and sister's behavior shows inappropriate financial interest. This could develop into guardianship issues in the future. Carol nodded. I understand. But is recording legal? In Ohio, one-party consent is legal. Meaning, as long as you know about it, it's fine, Elena pointed to Carol's mobile phone. A simple recording app would be good to have. That evening, following Elena's advice, Carol installed a recording app on her phone. She never thought she would go this far, but understood it was necessary to protect Tyler. The next day, insurance documents arrived from the hospital's accounting department. Carol carefully reviewed them and filled out the required information. Most of the accident treatment costs would likely be covered by insurance, but additional applications might be needed for long-term rehabilitation. Is there a problem? Asked Nancy from accounting. No, it's fine, Carol smiled. It's just that my family has an unusual interest in the insurance money. Nancy showed a sympathetic expression. That happens often, unfortunately. If you need anything, please feel free to consult with me. At the end of that week, Tyler's medical team held a new evaluation meeting. With continued improvement in brain waves and more active neurological reflexes, they began to show cautious optimism. Signs of recovery are definitely present, Dr. Ramsey explained. Of course, the road to full recovery may be long, but we are hopeful. Carol deeply thanked the doctors. A new light of hope had been kindled in her heart. Tyler would come back. And this time, she was determined to do whatever it took to protect him. Back in the room, it had started raining outside. But Carol's heart was clear. She approached Tyler's bed and spoke gently. It won't be long now, Tyler. The day you return to us is getting closer. Mama will always be waiting right here. And she squeezed her son's hand. Mom. A faint voice broke the silence in the hospital room. Carol looked up from the magazine she was reading and stared at the bed. Tyler's eyes were half open, looking toward her. Tyler. Carol gasped and rushed to her son's side. Can you hear me? It's Mom. Tyler's lips moved slightly. Mom, where? Carol pressed the nurse call button while gripping her son's hand. In an instant, medical staff gathered in the room. Becky was the first to arrive and immediately called for a doctor. Tyler, you're in the hospital. You had an accident. But it's okay, you've come back. Carol's voice trembled with excitement and relief. Dr. Ramsey checked Tyler's pupil response and asked a few simple questions. What's your name? Tyler. Wilson, the boy answered in a hoarse voice. What grade are you in? Tyler thought for a moment and replied, high school, sophomore. Dr. Ramsey nodded with satisfaction. His consciousness is clear. Basic cognitive functions seem to be preserved. After the examination, Carol was left alone with her son. Tyler was still weak and couldn't talk for long, but there was definite recognition in his eyes. How long? He asked. 3 weeks, Carol answered. You've been asleep. Tyler nodded slowly. Were you scared? Tears welled up in Carol's eyes. Yes, very. But you were strong. Really strong. That afternoon, Tyler gradually became able to stay awake for longer periods. He was still confused but could recognize Carol and the medical staff. The rehabilitation team conducted an assessment, and plans were made to begin light rehabilitation the next day. It's a miracle, physical therapist Michael Chin said. His age and physical fitness are helping his recovery. Of course, the road ahead is long, but he'll get through it. Carol couldn't contain her joy. She contacted her workplace and friends to share the news of Tyler's awakening. Congratulations and words of encouragement poured in. The next morning, as Carol was helping Tyler with breakfast, the hospital room door opened. Turning around, she saw her parents and Linda standing there. Carol, we heard Tyler woke up, her mother Diane said. We came right away. Carol was momentarily speechless. Her heart filled with caution and anger, but she tried to remain calm in front of Tyler. Tyler, remember? These are Grandma, Grandpa, and Aunt Linda, Carol said, feigning composure. Tyler looked at them with confusion. Oh, yes. Diane approached Tyler's bed with a sweet smile. Oh, Tyler. You've been through so much. Grandma and Grandpa were so worried. Harold stood by the bed and lightly patted his grandson's shoulder. You're a strong boy. That's the Wilson blood in you. Linda took a small box from her designer bag. A get-well gift. A brand-name watch. Perfect for a high school boy, don't you think? Carol felt uncomfortable with their sudden appearance and excessive kindness. No contact for 3 weeks, then appearing as soon as Tyler woke up. And expensive gifts. She tapped the recording app icon and put her phone in her pocket. Carol, could we talk in the hallway for a bit? Diane asked. When the two were in the hallway, Diane changed her tone. Why didn't you tell us Tyler had woken up? We're family. Family? Carol said sarcastically. When he was in a coma, you went to Hawaii. We couldn't help it. We couldn't cancel the reservation. Mom, that's enough, Carol said quietly. I know why you're here now. But let me warn you. Don't cause Tyler any unnecessary stress. Back in the room, Harold was having an awkward conversation with Tyler. Linda was checking her smartphone by the window. That afternoon, while Carol was briefly on a work call, Harold sat by Tyler's bedside. As Carol was about to return from outside the door, she heard his words. Tyler, about your insurance, has your mother started the procedures? When Carol entered the room, Tyler was looking at his grandfather with a confused expression. Insurance. What are you talking about? Carol asked coldly. Harold hurriedly changed the subject. Oh, just for the future. College tuition and such. That night, after Tyler's rehabilitation session, he asked his mother, were Grandma and Grandpa really worried about me? Carol was surprised at her son's perceptiveness. He was still recovering, but he could sense the situation. I'll be honest, she took a deep breath. Grandma and Grandpa don't put us first. Especially not this time. Tyler nodded slowly. I know. It was just you who stayed by my side while I was sleeping, right? Carol took her son's hand. Everyone shows love in their own way. But yes. I was here for you. The next day, Tyler's rehabilitation was progressing steadily. He could walk short distances with assistance, and his speech therapy was going well. The doctors were amazed at his recovery and began discussing discharge plans. He should be able to go home in about 3 days, Dr. Ramsey told Carol. Of course, outpatient rehabilitation will need to continue. Carol was delighted with this news and consulted with the hospital staff to plan a small farewell party. She decorated the room and invited Tyler's friends. And as predicted, her parents and Linda said they would attend. The afternoon before discharge, the room was decorated with balloons and congratulations banners. Tyler's friends came one after another, and nursing staff including Becky also visited to offer their congratulations. Carol was quietly making preparations. She had discussed with Elena the social worker and had everything ready before her parents and Linda arrived. At 3 o'clock, Diane, Harold, and Linda appeared. They entered the room with broad smiles and gave Tyler gifts. May I have your attention for a moment? Carol stood in the center of the room and said quietly. She took out a tablet and tapped the screen. The air in the room froze. These are recordings from the past 3 weeks, Carol said calmly. They show how my parents and Linda behaved while Tyler was in a coma. The recordings began to play. Diane's words about not being able to cancel the Hawaii trip, Linda's questions about insurance money, Harold's interrogation of Tyler. Everything was clearly recorded. Tyler is my son and my only true family, Carol said with conviction in her voice. I'll do anything for his recovery. But I will not allow anyone, even blood relatives, to try to take advantage of him. The room fell silent. The color drained from Diane's face, Harold trembled with anger, and Linda lowered her eyes in shame. Mom. Tyler called from the bed. He slowly sat up and said in a firm voice, I'm proud of my mother. She taught me that real family means the people who stay by your side when you're in trouble. Carol walked over to her son and put her arm around his shoulders. 1 year later, colorful flowers bloomed in Carol's garden, and a new garden table set stood on the wooden deck. Mom, I got the acceptance letter. Tyler ran into the living room waving a letter and hugged Carol. He had graduated from high school and applied for a special scholarship program at Ohio State University's medical school. Congratulations! Carol hugged her son tightly. I knew you could do it. Tyler's recovery had proceeded at a pace that exceeded the doctor's expectations. 6 months after the accident, he had returned to school and rejoined the soccer team. The slight numbness that remained in his left leg was improving with regular physical therapy. Moreover, from his experience with the accident and recovery, he had decided to pursue a career in emergency medicine. Carol, too, had begun walking a new path. Her career at the accounting firm was progressing well, having just been promoted to department manager this spring. Financial stability had also emerged, and she was steadily paying off the house mortgage. Oh, by the way, Mom, Tyler said, taking juice from the refrigerator. A letter came from Aunt Linda. Carol smiled. Her relationship with Linda was gradually being restored. A few months after that day in the hospital, Linda had sent a sincere letter of apology. She had begun distancing herself from their parents and was re-evaluating her life. Now they had a relationship where they reported on each other's situations with monthly phone calls. Let's read it. Carol opened the envelope. Linda's letter described how she had started teaching art to children at a local NPO and had moved into an apartment where she paid the rent by herself for the first time. She's changed too, Carol said reflectively. Meanwhile, Diane and Harold still refused to admit their wrongdoing. They had lost standing in local social circles and had been abandoned by many friends. According to Linda, they were now gossiped about at the golf club as the couple who went after their grandson's insurance money. Do you want to see Grandma and Grandpa? Carol asked Tyler. Tyler thought for a moment and replied, maybe someday. But for now, just us is fine. That night, Carol sat on the deck and looked up at the starry sky. Reflecting on the events of the past year, there had been painful and sad experiences, but ultimately it had been a journey that had strengthened the bond between her and Tyler. The doorbell rang, and when she opened the front door, Becky and several hospital staff members were standing there. Since the accident, they had been bound by ties like family. Surprise, they entered carrying a cake. We came to celebrate Tyler's acceptance. Lively laughter and words of congratulation echoed throughout the house. Carol smiled with a feeling of happiness. This is real family, people bound not by blood, but by love and support. Carol's life had entered a new chapter. And the road ahead, she would walk not alone, but with this new family.